Hello and
The
welcome
sa-
to Wizards, Warriors, and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast. I'm Jed Herne, author of The Thunder Heist,
Hello, Thunder Heist.
Hello.
and I'm joined by my co-hosts, which start with Mike.
I am Michael R. Fletcher, author of Beyond Redemption.
Dirk Ashton, author of the Paternus trilogy.
And as we're doing books, I'm going to go. I'm Rob Hayes, author of the Mortal Technique series. This is Never Die, and Pawn's Gambit is releasing either soon or now or something.
It's out by now. Pawn's Gambit will be out. Hang on, let me just check the calendar. Weird things are popping up. This episode comes out on the 25th. Pawn's
There
Gambit
you go.
comes
Pawn's
out
Gambit releases tomorrow. Go out and buy it. Buy it now.
Get
buy
out
it
there.
all.
26th.
I'm very excited for this. Never Die was one of my favorite reads of last year. So
Never Die.
and
was
also the
awesome,
cover for
yeah.
Pawn's Gambit looks amazing.
If you like Never Die, you're going to hate Pawn's Gambit.
Uh-oh.
What?
Don't buy it.
Is this reverse psychology? Does he want us to not buy it? Anyway,
Yeah.
we're talking about something that is in Pawn's Gambit and is also in Paternus and is also in Blackstone Heart and is also in the Thunder Heist. And that
It's in all the books.
It's in, well, not necessarily. Terry Pratchett would beg to differ. But we are talking about chapters, specifically how we structure chapters, our different approaches to it, sort of the pros and cons of long chapters versus short chapters, just all things chapters. I'm rambling a lot with this introduction. Rob, do you want to take us away and talk about how you think about chapters in a general sense? So like, are you an advocate of sort of long chapters, short chapters? Do you try to end them on cliffhangers or not? What's your sort of approach?
See, that's all over the place. Right. So I tend to think of it like this. Chapter length to me doesn't matter. I mean, I rarely do super long chapters, but I have been known to write like chapters that are 500 words. I've been known to write chapters that are like 8,000 words. It depends what the chapter, what the scene calls for. But I tend to try and structure chapters around a scene. I know, some authors try to do it as like, a period of time or a number of different things happening. But I try to think of, okay, this scene, maybe two scenes, who knows, but this scene, how long is that going to take? That will be a chapter.
Mhm.
For my own sanity more than anything else, I think. And I try to structure it so that in each chapter that is this scene, it rolls around it. There will be something delivered which is important to the story. There are no chapters in my books where nothing really happens. The characters are just talking shit or whatever. Something important will happen to the story.
Mhm.
And then as for the cliffhangers, I actually do try to leave most of my chapters on some sort of cliffhanger. They don't have to be big ones. It could just be like, in the distance, a wolf howled. Or it could be something a bit, bigger, as in, this character's literally on a cliff. Will they fall? And I actually, I didn't used to try to put those in. It wasn't until I was writing Never Die and I got my edits back from my editor, Mike Myers, the most angry editor I've ever met. Love him. And he literally pointed out on a few of my chapters, it's just like, I mean, this just kind of ends. Try and put a cliffhanger maybe, because nah. That's pretty much exactly what he says. He is brutal. So I now go into it thinking, okay, how can I end each of my chapters on some sort of cliffhanger, even if it's just a minor one, to make people instantly want to go, I'll read the next chapter, rather than just, that's a good place to put the book down.
Mhm.
So
I with my film background, I tend to think about, maybe I know a lot of authors do this, but I probably do it more than most, since I wrote screenplays and worked in film for so long. But I think of chapters in terms of scenes, and groups of scenes in terms of sequences, and groups of sequences or large groups of chapters in terms of acts, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. My books actually have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I remember early on, I was like, oh, I mean, how long can I make chapters? What's too long? What's too short? Um, and just really fretting over that for a long time. But then I found out that you just write the chapter, like Rob said, as long as it needs to be, just like a scene in a film. And I also think about how a scene in a film, and it generally is the same thing, not always, but generally is the same thing in books, is one action or group of actions usually that are taking place at a specific location or across specific locations in a relatively congruous piece of time, right? And then, you know, you have to think every chapter needs to even if it doesn't progress the story, it has to add significant information that should be known. It has to prepare characters for what they're doing next, maybe, or it has to add some new information or reveal to the story. So I think of it that way. You don't see a lot of scenes in films that just don't belong there, right? They end up on the cutting room floor. Um, Now, I will see in books some chapters that are like, what would happen if that completely went away? Would it change the story, the character arc, the knowledge of the world in any significant way? Then it doesn't need to be there. And a lot of that can happen in editing later. So again, just get it down and then you can do it. I also think about, and I think it's a great exercise, is look at how how scenes in films start and end, right? And I look at there are a lot of different ways that this happens. A lot of my chapters, I begin with a piece of dialogue, right? Some maybe a shocking or weird piece of dialogue. Um, and then I try to, or sometimes I'll just start by a few sentences on the location. But it's a new location, and the characters are beginning something new, carrying on something they've been assigned or embarked on at the end of the last chapter. Cliffhangers are good too, where oh my God, you know what just happened, or you can end it. But I also like to end them on a reveal of some sort, like you know someone says something that's new that we didn't know, that's a surprise, and then you end that chapter there. And then hopefully people move on. Sometimes it's simply a reaction of a character, to something that they just learned, and that very often in TV shows or in films, you'll have someone ask a question of someone, and they just look at them. They don't answer, so it's like, oh, you got to go to the next scene or chapter. Some chapters, though, they bounce around, but you have the little space or whatever. They bounce from, you have what in film is called parallel action, different things happening in different places with different characters, right? And you can do that chapter by chapter, but those need to move more quickly. And most books do that chapter by chapter, but it's not truly parallel action if you can do that within chapters. Sometimes I have a chapter that's really long. There's a chapter in there. Well, there's at least one chapter in all my books that is really long. It's almost like a full sequence as opposed to just a scene. And when it ends, that sequence is over. Whatever was happening, and it's over. And maybe a character is just so exhausted they fall asleep in the arms of a giant gorilla man running through the forest, running through the jungle, right? Or
specific,
right? Yeah. Or it begins the chapter when in the first one saying, we always travel in style, and in the next one, somebody's riding a flying unicorn, and they're up in the air and terrified, So think that's the way movies work, right? That's the way TV shows work, and just like a lot of books and stories and the way they work has been influenced heavily by role-playing games, RPGs, even if they aren't lit RPG, a lot of authors, a lot of fantasy has been heavily influenced by that. A lot of fantasy has also been heavily influenced by film and television. Mine is more to the second because I actually don't play RPGs, but I know that it gets talked about a lot. A lot of the biggest authors today are big RPG players, and they don't they don't deny that they were really heavily influenced by doing that, you know. So I mean, that's kind of my approach to chapters. I don't know if that makes any sense or is helpful at all.
Yeah, that's good. What about you, Mike?
So yeah, mine's different. Or the first several books, I really gave no thought to chapters at all. I just ended a chapter wherever I hit a point where I was like, yeah, this seems like a good spot to end a chapter. But really, Black Stoneheart was the first time I gave it serious thought. Like I started the book with an idea. It was actually 2 ideas for chapters,
which never happens usually.
Yeah, almost never happens. So I wanted to keep chapters short. My sort of ballpark goal was between 1,500 and 2,000 words a chapter, those are fairly short chapters. Not a big deal if it went over a bit, but for like Black Stoneheart, 3,000 words is probably like the longest chapter in there. And I wanted every chapter to end, if not on a cliffhanger, few of them are cliffhangers. I wanted each chapter to end on a tasty note. And so I lied when I said 2, it's 3. I actually tended to end chapters in the middle of a scene rather than at the end of a scene, because when you end in the middle of a scene, that really does drag the reader on. And for what it's worth, and I don't know if it worked or not, but Black Stoneheart, one of the most common reviews, things I hear or see in reviews is like impulsively or compulsively readable. I read this in one night. Like I didn't sleep that night. I forgot to eat. I didn't go to school. Like I see that a lot because the way it was written, short chapters, each one ends hopefully on a tasty note, but not at the completion of a scene.
You're picking up on something that I found really early on in my writing as well, which is, I forget where I read it, but someone just mentioned that like, if you have short chapters, your book is going to feel a lot quicker compared to if you have long chapters. And I was like, oh, that is not how I had initially thought about it. But then I started, like keeping this in mind as I was reading books. And it is such a truism I found. Like the shorter your chapters are, the greater the sense of progression that readers get while they're going through it, because they're like, oh, I've only been reading for a couple of minutes, but I've already done 2 chapters. Wow, I'm flying through this, and it actually makes your book feel really fast. If you look at thrillers, they take this to the extreme where, like a James Patterson book, for instance, some of the chapters might be like 1 or 2 pages. Like I've read some thriller books where the chapter might literally be over by the time you reach the bottom of the page that the chapter started on. And that to me is like, sometimes can be a little bit too on the short side, but it certainly does make you.
It doesn't apply to every story. No. Form follows function, right? And where chapters begin and end, their length is part of form. So it doesn't work for everything. So I wouldn't immediately, as a new author, grasp, I have to write short chapters.
Exactly.
Do what's best for the book and for the story. Because I have read books where it's chopping in the middle of a scene is brilliant, as I'm sure Mike's use of it is. But I've also seen it where it's just annoying, and they obviously just did this simply to keep the chapters shorter, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's just annoying. So
I often find that if a book has really short chapters, it never goes into enough detail in the characters for me. The characters never seem to really I never seem to be able to connect with them properly, because I don't get to spend enough time with them.
Yeah, I've had that.
mean,
I've had that problem with some books.
Yeah,
where I never really had enough time to just, get
you
to
just
know
start to get to know
anyone.
them and then
Yeah.
move away. And it's just like, I'd like to get to know a bit more. But again, that's just that could just be me. But for me, in fantasy, especially, I want to be able to connect to the characters. I want to know who they are. So I feel like longer chapters, at least, allow you to do that a bit better.
Yeah, I think also part of why it hopefully worked for Black Stoneheart is it's literally one character.
I was just gonna say
POV,
that, yeah.
And like you've got an entire book with this one point of view. So like your short chapter, your next chapter, you're back.
What chapter, POV did you use, Mike?
The main first person.
First person? Did you?
Yeah. Yep.
Past tense, first person.
Yes, past tense first.
Cool. Yeah. All right. I didn't know that.
Was the first time I've done that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I need to actually read it. I own it.
It's weirdly scary writing it too, but we probably talked about.
Well, that's a whole different thing when you're trying to get into a character's head that much that you're trying to literally write from their voice, especially if that voice isn't your voice.
I mean, I plan to do the same thing in another short series that I want to do in the Paternus world. So I'm interested in looking at that stuff as much as I can.
But you can't head hop if you're doing first person, Dirk.
No, exactly. So it'll keep me from it'll keep me from doing that.
The head hopping is actually I thought it would be more distracting than it is because I'm about a quarter of the way through Paternus Rise of Gods at the moment, but it's quite seamless.
The problem is it usually is really distracting. It's just Dirk manages to make it work.
Yeah, he's still.
Some people still really don't like it. I really kind of despise the term head hopping because people tend to throw it at everything that was once simply considered omniscient POV, and it was done all the time for decades upon decades. But people authors have just don't do it that often. It's harder to read. It is, and it's harder to read and keep track. And a lot of readers don't like that. So what I tried to do was smooth it out as much as I can, but I really thought that the story required that more omniscient, and it works for some people. It doesn't work for others, and that's fine. It's just like anything else. So yeah.
Just a couple of quick more things with chapter stuff before we wrap up, because I know Mike has to head off soon. I think for me, some stuff that I found really useful is, definitely that thing about the length of your chapters can be a really easy tool to kind of control the pacing that's going through your book. So figure out what kind of pacing you want, and at different points in your book, that may be different types of pacing. Like for instance, with a lot of my books, I try to make the reader, as you've mentioned, Mike, sort of compulsively read through the first couple of chapters without putting it down. So for instance, in Across the Broken Stars, what that looked like was until pretty much chapter 5, every chapter ends with either a big reveal, some sort of twist, or a cliffhanger, which ideally gets the reader 5 chapters into the book before I then sort of finish off that main opening sequence and then give the reader a chance to rest at that point. Because I think that, to your point earlier, Rob, if you give them a really finished off part, particularly early on in your book, it can be a chance for readers to just sort of skip out of reading the rest of it. Whereas if you at least sort of drag them through those initial couple of chapters without making it really hokey or on the nose cliffhangers and stuff, it can be a really good way to get them hooked on your story. And then once they are there because they genuinely like what they're reading, that's when you might want to bring some pauses in. Because particularly with big epic fantasies, I haven't read the third Paternus book, Dirk, but I really do hope that in the 200,000 words or however much it is, there are chapters that end at a point where I feel okay to put the book down for the night and have some sleep. Because I think that I
think you will. You'll
okay, good. Because that can be the other issue, is if you it can be exhausting sometimes if you are just trying to drag readers through, this massive thing with cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger. That's not to say it can't be done, but it is difficult. So I think that for me, like, I really leveled up a lot as a writer when I just sort of started thinking about how chapters could be used to influence reader engagement with my book. So if there's one takeaway that you kind of get from this episode, it's that, like, don't just take chapters for granted. Like, with some books, maybe you just want to write it and then insert the chapters at the end, which I have done, which is weird. But if you can sort of approach them with intentionality and think about how you're hooking readers at the start of each chapter, in the same way that you put all that effort into hooking readers at the start of your book, each chapter is another opportunity to, reel them back in. And just like, I think approaching chapters with more intentionality about it, whether that is you want to feel immersed, like Rob was saying with those longer chapters, or you want that like suspense and that fast pacing that comes with shorter ones. It's just a useful thing to look out for when you're reading books and also when you're sort of structuring your own.
I agree. And the whole idea of, you can worry about, to a certain extent, I have broken up chapters into 2 and split them up with another POV chapter in between. Absolutely. And don't feel like you're stuck and become obsessed with chapters and chapter length while you're actually writing, because you can go back and tweak some things a little bit and split them up. I think Rob's is really, really good at opening and closing chapters and showing what needs to be done, getting in and getting out.
I didn't used to be. When I my first trilogy, I pretty religiously tried to stick to chapter length. Actually, I basically
mistake,
2,000 words was going to be my chapter length, and I mean, there's a bit of leeway here and there, but I tried to stick to 2,000 words as each individual chapter. And I think just as I sort of like, as I evolved as a writer, I just sort of moved away from that because it's a bit limiting. And to see where the chapter takes me and how long it's actually going to need to be.
Well, there's one more approach to chapter organization that I've seen that works sometimes. Is, say you've got 4 POVs, right, and 4 POV chapters. You do this person, this person, this person, this person, that back, and then recycle that all the way through.
That's exactly what I did,
and that's cool in a way, but it also can get you stuck because every chapter has to have a reason. And even I absolutely love Joe Abercrombie, but he does that to a certain extent, a big extent, in at least the first book of the first Law series.
The book itself.
Yeah, and I found a few of those. I think there are 3 chapters where seems really obvious that he's set himself up in this thing and he just has to have a chapter from this person's POV, and you really don't get anything new out of it. And that was his first book. So, I certainly can't blame him, but you have to be careful about that kind of thing too.
The other problem you have with that, with something like George R. R. Martin doing it, each chapter is named. You know who that chapter is going to be about.
Yeah.
So when you get to a brand chapter, that's a good time to put the book down.
I love the brand chapters.
But that's just it. It's like different people they like different characters, but it's that sort of idea where, I mean, it's useful to do it that way because you know that this chapter is going to be from this person's point of view.
Right. I think Mike's going to have to run here pretty quick.
It's a good place to go.
I was just going to say, we're getting close to Mike having to head off. Maybe we can do another chapter discussion in the future because, like, I didn't realize there was this much stuff to talk about with it.
There's a lot.
It does open up a lot of can of worms, which is quite interesting. Mike, any quick last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think we've nailed a lot of good stuff. I'm excited. I want to try Omniscient at some point because I think that's the one that scares me the most. Which was kind of why I wrote Blackstone Heart first person, because at the time that was terrifying. But I read this guy, Skullsworn by Brian Staveley, and it is so fucking good, and he did it so well. I read that and I was like, oh, I want to tell a story like that.
Is that Omniscient?
No. Sorry, this one's first person.
Oh, okay.
But you should
Skullsworn is why
That's the book that made me decide to give first person a go as well. So
yeah.
All right,
So,
it's good on the list.
Yeah, it's that good.
Skull Sworn by
but
Brian
now
Stabley.
I think
Yeah.
Omniscient is the next sort of like most terrifying thing. And I think I could do like a really bad job of it, so I'll probably give it a chance.
No, try present
Well,
tense.
if you need any tips, don't ask me because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap up the episode there so Mike can head off. Thank you everybody for listening. Was I going to ask a question? No, I don't think I was. Thank you everybody for listening. We will see you all next time. Bye everybody.
Buy my book.
Thanks.
Buy his
cheeky
book.
plug at the end.
Buy Rob's book.
Buy Rob's book, which is also Dirk's book, which is also Mike's book, which is also my book.
I don't know if this will work. Look, cover. Oh, it's not going to work.
Oh,
Hey,
so
Rob's holding up the
pretty.
Porn Gambit cover.
Smaxy.
That actually displays pretty well for a phone screen.
I don't have the book. I don't have a physical copy yet. It's annoying.
And it's only 10 days until it launches. Or if you're listening to this, 1 day.
Mine arrives, I think, Monday.
Mine doesn't arrive till February. What the hell?
No, mine's I know the release isn't till like the 26th, and you have to pre-order the ebook, but your print books are up.
I know.
Yeah,
That's
so I think I get mine Monday or Tuesday.
I think you can leave a review on Amazon of the paperback as well before for the ebook. So
Yeah, if it's for sale, yeah, absolutely.
We should do an episode on releases.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
How not to do them.
how not to do them, how to avoid becoming a nervous wreck while you're doing it as well.
Yeah.
Does anybody know how to do that?
I don't think so. I gotta say,
we could talk a lot. We could talk a lot about how things do. I mean, ML Spencer's new release. Good God, is it doing well?
Is it?
Bryce O'Connor has now bypassed like some of the biggest sellers. I have mine too.
Size of this thing.
Some of the biggest sellers are Bryce's book has been out for what, 3 months? Bryce and Luke's book, Iron Prince, he's got over 3,000.
Oh, Iron Prince.
3,000 ratings. 3,000. That's
Jeez.
Insane.
That's
on
crazy.
Amazon. And the one that they released, G.D. Penman and Luke's book with the same group was #1 last night or this morning. That's insane.
Which one's that one? Savage Dominion.
The new lit RPG.
Yeah, Savage Dominion.
Yeah. Insane. Yeah.
Well, funnily enough,
those guys know what they're doing. They know
that
what
one
they're
also
doing.
has like a border and then like the title at the top. So what I'm thinking is the new way to do
borders.
covers, borders.
Yeah, it's the new fad.
Yep. And Savage Dominion has it too.
Yep. That's it. We've nailed it. Borders.
Fame and fortune, here we come.
All right, see you, Mike.
All right, see you, dudes.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for watching Wizards, Warriors, and Words. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that we can keep growing this and keep sharing our writing advice with more authors. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.